Well, I want to dive in here to the situation in our country, Amanda. When you heard of Brianna and Ahmaud and George Floyd, the most recent events, another incident that happened in Atlanta just this week, um, what went through your mind, and what were you thinking?
Um, what went through my mind is it was very heartbreaking to see that happen again. And I was also angry because this seems to be a pattern where it just keeps happening and happening again and again. And we don't have any control.
Yes, I think when I first called you, I heard you become very emotional, which is not like you. You're normally not a crier,
Yeah,
but you cried, and rightfully so. I could tell that it touched you very deeply.
it did.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say I don't understand everything, but I understand what it is to be in pain and to hurt, and I am sad and angry with you. So, yeah. Well, I thought that I might ask you for our parents today, for our viewers today. Have you you're 30 and you've grown up in Fort Bend County. You're a first generation American. Your parents are from Libya and Liberia.
Yes.
See, am I right that time?
Yes, ma'am.
See, I have a lot to learn. And I wanted just to know, our viewers to know, have you experienced racism as a 30-year-old in a diverse county like Fort Bend County?
Yes, I have experienced racism. One example is my sister's graduation. I took my cousins, so I was the only African American woman, and my three Black cousins, and we went to the grocery store. And one of the employees there decided to follow us around the whole entire store until we made our purchase. So we made our purchase and we walked out. And I can remember the conversations my cousins and I had when we went in the car, and we were just angry because they automatically profiled us and assumed that we were up to no good. But that's not the case. We just went in there to make a purchase so we could take it back for my sister's graduation. And that's very unfortunate that that employee thought it was okay to do that, because I felt very uncomfortable. But we were on a mission and we had to get what we needed to get.
I can imagine that. And tell me about maybe in school growing up or with friends or peer groups.
In school, it was a hit or miss. There's sometimes there were people that were very, very accepting, and then there were some that there were not, unfortunately. And I just learned to continue to love myself, because that's one thing that my parents instilled in us is character. There are going to be people that may not like you because of the skin color. There may be people that don't like you because of your name, but my parents always made sure to tell us it's who you are as a person. And all you need to know is that God loves you, we love you, and you just keep on doing and being you. Don't change for anybody. And then one important thing my dad also told us is you don't ever want to get out of your character because someone else is in a negative mindset.
You have great parents, and I just appreciate the graciousness of their spirit and yours too. Well, one thing that was new to me that I didn't know, and I've never asked you in all the years that I've known you and all the conversations that we've had, I never asked you if you had experienced racism from law enforcement before, or had felt uncomfortable, because I didn't know to ask. And quite frankly, Amanda, I never thought anything would ever happen to you. You're so sweet, and you're a law abider, and I just never thought anyone would be mean to you or think you were somebody that you weren't. But you shared a story with me, and I thought maybe you would share part of that with our viewers.
Yes, I was on my way home from Chick-fil-A, and I was pulled over by a police officer. Did not ask me for my ID, just pulled me out of the car, and he misidentified me as the wrong person. And eventually, once they found out I was the wrong person, they let me go. But there was just a whole lot of things that spiraled up to that. And now, because of that situation that happened when I was 17 and I'm now 30, I'm afraid of police officers. And because it's just like, I don't know what to expect when I get pulled over. My parents taught me to always listen and follow authority, which I continue to do. But when I get pulled over, my heart starts pounding because I just don't know at all.
Yeah, when you shared that story with me, I could hear you shared some additional details with me that we both ended up in tears at the end of that conversation. And I think I understood for the first time, as many white people understood, is that many times your experience, or sometimes your experiences in this country are different from ours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as at least believers in Christ, if you're not a believer in Christ, maybe you can appreciate the words of Jesus anyway here, that when somebody else hurts, we're to hurt with them. It's called empathy. And and we're to carry one another's burdens. And I immediately felt that when you shared that with me. I thought, I've got to hold this with her. I can't let Amanda go through this alone, or any of my Black friends go through these things alone. So I think it was a wake-up call for those of us from European descent that we didn't know before. There's a piece of this that we need to address, and that is the idea that because many of our Black brothers and sisters have had negative experiences with law enforcement, that doesn't indicate that all law enforcement's bad or that police officers are bad. And so I think when we talk to our children about this, we take it as an individual case that these specific police officers did something horrendous, horrible. We should be angry about it. And there should not be police officers in our force. And I think great police officers would tell you this too. There should not be bad cops in the force. And I think we're making some great strides in some of our policies. And I think you'll see some more things come up. Breonna's Law just came about, where a police officer is not allowed to barge into a home without not identified first. Things like this are occurring, and I think that is those are good steps. But I have dear friends in law enforcement. I have Black friends in law enforcement, and I think that that we can tend to put people in a category. All cops are bad, or all Black men are bad, or whatever it is, and nobody wants that on either side. And quite frankly, that is not God's way. Everybody wants to be judged by the character internally, by what Martin Luther King called the content of their character. And so when we talk to children, I think we need to talk about these things in specific ways, that there were some police officers who treated Black people unkindly. But really refrain from this idea that police officers are bad or police officers are racist, because in my experience from the police officers I know personally, that isn't true. And they still need our support and our care as they go out every day to defend and support our communities to be safe. But we also want the Black community to be safe. And we want there to be a positive, good relationship, in particular between Black men and police officers. We all want that. And so we're all working to that end. But if we categorize people as bad, all of them are bad, I think we're doing a real disservice to our children. Don't do that. Don't do that. Our children need to see positive Black men role models. So reading books about Black men who've done amazing things is great, and reading positive books about our law enforcement and our police, are both great strategies to teach children the truth, and that is there are wonderful Black men, there's wonderful police officers. And so we just want to take care of and handle those law enforcement officers who have really long been held a bit unaccountable for specific tragedies. And I think we're making some changes and some strides. So I'm excited about that. Share with me how you've handled those things, or what has kept you going. You would experience things like that, and then I would see you and you were smiling and ready to love children and teach kids. And tell me about how in your spirit you were able to do that.
Honestly, my parents, and just being in church, because my parents instilled in us, you have to, if you love God, you have to love everyone. And they said, it doesn't matter how that person treats you, you go above and beyond to treat them even better. Show them the love, extend grace. And that's an important word, grace. And that's something that's really hard to do. But I look back and I think of it as, if I wouldn't want someone to be mean to me, I'm not going to do that to you, you know, because I have to take into consideration your feelings and who you are as a person.
That's right.
And that's my motto with anybody that I meet.
Well, I have definitely experienced that from you and seen you extend that grace to others so many times. And it's a beautiful thing. I do see God's character in you, Amanda. So, Stephanie, how about you? You and T have been married for a number of years yet. I got to go to your wedding, and I can't believe it's already been all those years ago. And I remember when you had Callie and Brixton, and I've had so many heartfelt conversations with you over the years and with Terrace over the years. But I don't know that I've ever talked to either one of you about racism or about race. Have you and T had some new conversations in this past month through these situations that are going on? And what kind of new things have you learned about T?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we certainly have had a lot of conversations lately, particularly wrapped around the recent situations and just the different viewpoints of things I've experienced versus things that he's experienced. And, you know, I feel like through a lot of these recent conversations, it's encouraging us to depend on God even more. Because at the end of the day, you know, as we can see, we live in a very broken world with a lot of broken people. We're broken ourselves. And, you know, I would say what's been most encouraging for me is that him and I are, through this, we're learning a lot together, but we're also learning a lot separately. So on our own time, which has been really powerful because, you know, once the kids go to bed and we're in the living room at night and we're just talking and having conversation, it's like, well, he'll read something that's eye-opening, or I'll run across something that I was like, wow, you know, what do you think about this? And so I think it's important to have those authentic and real conversations. I mean, obviously I'm married to a Black man and I love him dearly and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But some of these conversations that we've had to have lately have been really tough. And it's been heartbreaking and it's made me angry and kind of like what Amanda was saying, all the emotions, right? Because he's such an incredible man. And it's hard for me as his wife to imagine him being profiled like this on a daily basis. It's hard to think that, you know, there are certain people that just by looking at him will automatically judge him. I mean, he shared some things with me that, and through some recent videos that he's done, that, you know, when he goes into a store, if he's not going to buy it, he's not going to touch it. You know, he doesn't keep his hands in his pockets. He always makes sure his hands are visible. You know, lots of different things he's been taught over the years to try and prevent some of these thoughts going through people's minds. You know, he shared some encounters that he's had with, you know, different people. And I think for me, the biggest takeaway is kind of what I was saying at the beginning, is that, you know, we're all broken. We live in a very broken world and we all need Jesus. I mean, you know, it's hard to wrap your head around all of this that's been going on. But I think we've got to rally together and, you know, really instill in our kids the value of our differences and how we have to celebrate those differences, and truly listen to each other and listen to the people that are different from us.
I agree. And I did want to say thank you so much for coming on for this Zoom call. I know as an administrator, as a principal, going through this time has been incredibly exhausting for you. And I can't imagine the weight on your shoulders making decisions to prepare for next year. So it's just been a heavy time for you and Terrace, I know.
It has, but you know, in this season, in any tough season, that's when growth happens. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to wrap up my first year as an AP through COVID, because it has been a whirlwind, but man, it has definitely made me better. And I know I'm going to look back on this and think about all the ways that it made me better for sure.
Yes. Well, you and Terrace are raising 2 biracial children in this community. How will UNT handle racism in your home, and how will you, or are you talking to Callie and Brixton about those things?
Yeah, so, you know, Brixton, our 2-year-old, he is our son, and then Callie, she is our 6-year-old daughter. And I would say that racism is not an easy conversation to have, but we have to create space for those conversations. So something that we're learning about our daughter Callie is she's very much a processor. So, for example, the other day, Terrace was on a Zoom call and it was an interview similar to this, and she walked in when I was watching it, and she's like trying to wave, you know, hey daddy, and obviously he can't see her, but through that she started asking some questions, and you know, like why is he doing that? And so I had to kind of walk her through, you know, that there was a wonderful Black man named George Floyd, and unfortunately he died. You know, there are some people in our world that are full of hate and that, you know, maybe make a wrong decision. And I kind of shared with her that we make wrong decisions every day, you know, letting her know in the same mindset, like as a Christ follower, that sin is sin. And it's really hard for little kids to wrap their head around. If we're honest, it's hard for us to wrap our head around that sometimes. But, you know, try to explain that process to her. And after that, she didn't have any questions anymore, but I know they're coming. She's definitely a child that kind of processes things, and questions will continue to come about it. But I think it's important to create space for those conversations. You know, if it's a time for her to speak, then I'm just going to listen and I'm going to take it in and, you know, just answer the questions the best way I know how. You know, I think it's important that we teach our kids that our differences are what make us unique. And this is a really beautiful thing when it is taught and shown with love and acceptance. And I think that we all bring a different perspective, kind of what I was talking about earlier, and we all bring value. And so as parents, we have to continue to share the importance of loving others like Jesus. And I think at the end of the day, we have to show them and teach them that love is a choice, and it's also an action. So we love others by doing, not just what we're saying. And so, you know, we have to model this for our kids. If we are saying all these things, but we're not truly demonstrating that by loving others, then it doesn't mean anything to our kids, you know? I mean, if we think about it, our kids are the most observant little beings. They notice everything. They watch our every move. They pay attention to our nonverbal cues. And so I think it's not only important to show his love, but also to be mindful of even our nonverbal communication, because at times it can be perceived as something that it's not, or maybe it's an opportunity for us to check our hearts and really analyze and figure out where we are with, you know, different situations. to see how we want our kids to perceive what we believe.
Yes, somebody gave a great example of that, Stephanie. Somebody said a nonverbal cue would be like if you have your child by the hand and you walk by a group of African American men or boys or teenagers or whatever, and you pull them tighter to you as if to say they're not safe.
Yeah.
The nonverbal cue there is that there's something to be afraid of. So I think those things, wow, you really have to think about not only what you say or don't say, but small things like that might be instilling something in a child that will be painful to someone else later.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I wanted to throw both of this out to both of you. I've heard this question or thought a lot is, how do I start the conversation with my child? I don't want to ruin their innocence. They don't know about racism yet. They don't know. Should we talk to children about it before they're exposed to it? What are your thoughts on starting the conversation about racism with children?
Yes, it's important to have that conversation with kids, especially when you're going into a classroom at school, because it's very diverse and you have different kids of different nationalities. And I think it's important to sit down and let them know God made all of us different. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different perspectives, but we all get sad at the same time. We all get angry, happy, but that's what makes us important. And I think by explaining that to your child, they can appreciate any person that they come in contact with. You know what? I value you. I love you. I see your heart. Oh, I didn't know that. I learned something new from you, because you can learn from somebody just by having a simple conversation. For example, in my class, we talk about it with my students. I use 2 eggs for Martin Luther King. We do a white egg, we do a black egg. And so I'm like, hey, what do you guys notice? Well, one's white, one's brown. Okay, well, let's crack it open. Well, when you crack it open, what do you notice? It's the same. And I tell my kids, well, guess what? You've experienced the same feelings. You're sad, you're happy, you're angry. Guess what? That doesn't make us any different, because we've experienced the same emotions on the inside. So now it's just about showing that love and being a friend to everyone you come in contact with. And that's really, really important. For me, love, 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 love your neighbors, and when they see that, it makes them feel a certain kind of way, because I look at it as, if you're taking the time to get to know me as a person, know my character, find out what I like, what I don't like, you're telling me that you value me as a person, you value who I am, you value where I come from. It's okay for us to be different, but it's important to know that just because you're different does not mean that we can't be friends and we can't hang out and we can't get to know each other and learn from each other and grow from each other.
So Amanda, you would say prior to kindergarten is an important time to have these conversations before children enter school or daycare.
Yes, very important.
Stephanie, do you have anything to add to that?
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, everything Amanda said is, her and I are very much on the same mindset. I would say, to be completely honest, so Brixton, our 2-year-old son, he just turned 2. And, he's just starting to talk in full sentences, and he's a very active little boy. But I'm seriously thinking about how, other than reading books, how can I make this real for him? Some things I've considered is through puppets. So he loves puppets. And I've considered, I just ordered a few more books. I have a ton, but I just ordered a few more books that have been on back order because they became available again. And I've considered maybe trying it that way and reading him the book and using puppets to explain some of these, start having these conversations even with my 2-year-old. I think it's never too early to have these conversations. And I know I have young kids, but Terrace and I have always said, whenever he did student ministry, whatever our kids experience, we want them to experience it at home before they go anywhere else. So if we can have these conversations now before they have them in real life out in public or wherever, hopefully we can dive a little deeper and have some open discussion about our experience and what we can do to, like Amanda was saying, love other people, extend grace, and, just to have more perspective or insight. No one likes going into anything blindsided. And I think it's important that as parents, we do our part in having these open conversations and open dialogues with our kids, for sure.
There's a lot of talk recently about being anti-racist. And the best I can liken that to, I think Amanda shared this with me, is being anti-bullying, which being racist is a whole nother level than being a bully. But it's the best thing that the closest thing I can put it to, or child abuse. It's kind of like you wouldn't walk by an adult abusing a child without intervening or calling someone to help. We don't allow children to bully other children on the playground, and when they do see it, we tell them to report it or to say something. In the same way, I'm wondering if it's not just enough anymore to just not be racist. If there's kind of something new to teach children about when they observe racism or they hear something, what could we encourage our children to do at school, in their neighborhood, even at their own family gatherings, to follow Jesus here and stand up for others?
Using their voice. Just like for me, I'm really big on you love God and you love people, right? Well, so it's the same with you telling the kids. If you see something that's not right, they may not have the wisdom or the courage to say it. Speak on their behalf. Be that voice. Let them know you're not in it alone, because the more people that stand behind them, they feel, okay, I have this, I can do it, I can get through it. And it's letting them know that, I may not understand what you're going through, but just know that I'm taking on that burden with you. And the kids need to understand that. And when they show that grace and that love, it makes a whole lot of a difference to where it's going to inspire other people and other kids to want to lead that example for all the other children.
I would agree with that. And I would say, as a parent, it's important that we're teaching our kids how to handle those situations. Because, the reality is, some kids are very outspoken. They don't have any problem telling you like it is. And then other kids are like, I'm not saying a word. So I think the kiddos that are a little more reserved or shy, I think it's important that obviously we still push if you see something, say something and speak up for your friends. But in the event that they don't feel comfortable doing that in that moment, I think it's really important that we teach them that, okay, you may not have had the courage to say something right then, but now you can go tell your teacher, or now you can go tell your mom or your dad or a trusted family member or adult that can then say something, right? Or at least have that conversation of, if this happens again, this is a way that you could address it. Because if we're honest, as adults, there are many times, there's times Terrace and I have even talked about in this situation we're talking about right now, where he's like, I feel like I maybe let a few jokes go by and didn't say anything. And there's, Ann, there was one situation where another mom said something very inappropriate to me. And it was very uncomfortable for me, and it was just not okay at all. And I should have said something, right? But sometimes in the moment, we're angry, or we're hesitant, or we're nervous, or, we're no different than our kids in those situations sometimes. But I think what's important is that we have those conversations afterwards if you don't feel comfortable saying something in that moment, to where we can make it better in the event that situation happens again.
Yeah, that's good. I think it just becomes allowed and commonplace if no one ever says something. And something about our silence says it's okay, it's not really a big deal. Mm-hmm. And what we know is it is a big deal. There's been a lot of these images, especially of George Floyd, that I can't get out of my mind. And I know that children have probably seen some of those images on the news or on their parents' phones or on their phones. Or they've seen the protests of people holding signs and shouting. And so how might we explain to children if they ask, what's going on? Why, what's happening? How could we explain that to a child in a way that's age appropriate and helpful.
How I would explain it to a kid, a protest is something that they're standing up for. It's something they believe in, and they want to be heard. They want you to listen. They want you to understand where they're coming from and see their perspective. And that's one way of doing so, is by having a protest in a peaceful way where you can listen and hear and have that conversation. It's a starting point, basically.
Yes, I love using Martin Luther King Jr.'s examples of protests that children even marched in. There's a great book called Let the Children March about the peaceful protest with Martin Luther King and about two children who met at their church to protest for civil rights in America. And we know that worked, and we know the huge leaps that America made and changes during that time. And I can only hope that we will make another big leap forward here during this time in America. Amanda, you said something interesting to me not long ago. I was just recounting the things that we've been doing at church, and I say every Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. and we share video about him and we tell kids about him, and I just think it's great that we're doing that. And you said, well, it's not enough. And I was like, you're right. It's not enough. And I was patting myself on the back for doing racial reconciliation curriculum once a year. And you said it's not enough, and you're absolutely right. So what could we learn from the school system that you both work and serve in, or ideas maybe that you have for even years to come that we could take into our churches, that we could take into our homes, ways that we could make this better?
I would say first, it's important that our kiddos are surrounded with culturally responsive text. And when I say that, I mean, like, I am a white woman. I should not only have books that are full of white women, right? I am not being culturally responsive if I am not opening my eyes to new perspectives and new ideas. In a classroom setting, and in a churches and in our community and in our homes, it's really important that we have a variety of picture books and other texts that represent all different cultures, all different races, all different beliefs. Because if we don't teach our kids that not all kids are just like ours, then we are doing them a disservice. And something that our campus did, I work at a Title I campus, similar to Amanda. We're a bilingual campus. And we recently found an amazing collection through Scholastic this year called Scholastic Rising Voices. And it is specifically focused on for Hispanic males and Black males. And it is just a beautiful, beautiful collection of books. And I highly recommend it. It really there's a ton of different text in there, but I think it's really important that our kids have access to books and picture books that look like them. When you see a book, for example, my daughter, she's biracial. She has a lot of hair, y'all. I'm still working on trying to figure out her beautiful hair, but she has a lot of hair, and typically it's in two big puffs, right? Anytime I see a book that has a picture of a biracial girl with these big pigtail puffs, I buy it, because I'm like, she can see herself in that text. And it is a beautiful thing when you make that connection in a book. So I would say first and foremost, that's a good starting point. And just to be mindful of maybe the collection that you have.
That's awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Amanda, would you add anything that we could do that you might do in your classroom or would like to do? How can we do more than just MLK Day? That's important.
I completely agree with everything Stephanie is saying, right on. Also, I think it's important as an individual, and even as a family, that you educate yourself. And you're educating yourself by finding different books to read, by having conversations with different people. And by you sharing those conversations, you start learning more, and it opens up questions for you to find answers to. And like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. And I think that's really, really good to just have those open conversations and continue to educate yourself, because things are constantly changing.
Yes, they are. Stephanie, you were going to share.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would definitely agree with that. And I think a combination of having a variety of texts for our kids to have access to, and maybe they may not ask a question right then, but they're processing and they may be asking questions later. And what Amanda just said is having that open conversation, that open dialogue of maybe at the end of the book, hey, what was something that you just learned that you had never known before? Just open-ended conversation to just, get them thinking that it's not just the way they think, and that's not necessarily the right way, right? It's important to have an open perspective. I read a book recently called Colorful, Celebrating the Colors God Gave Us. And one of the quotes from this children's book that I love is, God must love color to have made all of the earth's people with such wonderful shades. And I think that is just a beautiful example that, God created us unique, and we have the opportunity to celebrate our differences, appreciate our differences. And in the midst of these open conversations, I think it's most important to listen and really just hear other people's struggles and their stories, so we can improve and have a different perspective.
I think to listen, to add on to that, Stephanie, we have to ask questions too of our friends. Like, I've called several of my friends to ask them, have you ever experienced racism? It's a question I never asked before. I didn't know to ask it. And, but now I know, see? And so it's different now that I have the information, now that my eyes have been open to a few things. Now I know, and now I feel responsible, with what I know. And asking that question is scary because you're not sure what you're going to hear. And, and you will experience sadness or anger with them, or grief, or like me, I felt bad that I had never asked that before. So, anyway, but I think asking that question is helpful. Or how are you doing? Or what does this time mean to you? And I think it's amazing how your eyes can be open to things when you ask those questions. I think for us as educators or parents especially, we want children to understand that they're created in the image of God, which gives every person intrinsic value. It makes them, the way I would say that to a kid is super duper important. That's how I would say it to a kindergartner. And so when we see people the way that God sees them, it's very difficult to be unkind to them. And so I think as we continue over and over to share the truth with our children, that God made that person and they are super duper important. And we want to treat them the way God would want to treat them. Because when we see people through the eyes of God, their value elevates in our mind. And so I think as much as we can talk about that with our children, the better they'll be for it, and the better will be for it. I kept thinking as I looked at the face of Derek, the police officer who had his knee on George Floyd's neck, I didn't see any indication that he believed in his soul that George Floyd was a child of God, an image bearer of God. And so I can't help but to think that as we educate our children on the truth of each other, the ones of us that look different, the ones of us that have mental illness and may act different, the ones of us that are physically different and look very different or have deformities about us, that as we realize that we're created in the image of God, each of those people have incredible intrinsic value. Not because of what they look like, but because of of who made them,
Hmm.
because of who made them. So this is really a great opportunity. I would say to parents, don't be afraid to start talking about these things with your kids, because quite frankly, I have grown kids now. There's a lot of tough conversations to come. So you might as well just jump in here because you got to warm up, because there's a lot of hard things coming. I'm telling you. And whether your children are white or brown or Asian or black or a mixture of them, I think you have to start talking about, one, people are created in the image of God, and they're super important to us. And because God loves them, we're going to love them. Two, talking about how because we're different, we can learn a lot from each other. And isn't that cool that we're all different, that we're not all the same? And like Stephanie and Amanda have both said, sharing books where you're exposing children visually to people that don't look like them or don't sound like them. And you're giving your kid exposure to that, where it's just always been normal for them to see people of different colors, or that they make different sounds, or you know, speak differently, different languages, I should say. So, and then talking to children about what to do when they see something happening to someone else, or maybe they do something. What about that? What if they do something that is mean to someone else? You know, the fact that they can come and apologize for that and accept their wrongness for it. I think that's good too, to provide a safe place for kids to admit that they've said things or done things to hurt somebody else of a different race, and us to hug them and say, it's okay, we know differently now, and we're going to do differently now. You know, this idea that we can change, you know, and that's good for older kids. By the age of 9 is when we hear that kids' ideas about race are formed. 0 to 9. This is the age group that we have. So I thank you, ladies, for being on with us today. Is there anything else that you would want to share with our parents today?
Don't be afraid to have the conversations with your kids, and thank you for taking the next step. And just remind your kids that you love God, you love everyone, and just get to know them for who they are inside and know their character.
I love that, Amanda.
Thank you.
I would totally agree. You know, I think it's important to kind of get a gauge of where our kids are with everything going on right now, and you know, just continue to stay educated ourselves with updates, so when they ask questions, we are able to speak to those, and continue to do your research, you know, because we have more and more things to learn, and I think our kids do too. And so the more that we are modeling that learning, they're going to be doing the same thing. And so I just urge you to do your research, model and extend love and grace to your kids so they will extend it to others, and be open to new perspectives. You know, just because I think about something and it should be one way, that does not mean it's the right way or the only way. And I am learning new things every day. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it is, you know, I'm able to learn from so many people around me, like Anne and Amanda, and so many more that have just taught me to think through a different lens or perspective, which has ultimately helped me as a mom, as a wife, as an educator, and in so many other ways.
Awesome. I can't imagine my life without people who didn't look like me. They have blessed my life in so many ways and made it more rich and full. And I am still learning. I'm 45 years old, and I've raised 2 grown children and have 1 coming on up here in the second grade now. And I'm still learning. I'm signing up for the class to say, you know, what more research is there, as Stephanie said, what more do we have to learn? And I I think we have a lot more to learn, and we have a lot of work to do yet. We've made great strides, but boy, do we have more work to do. And I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you so much for helping us and teaching us today. Y'all are amazing.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you for having us.